Hi, this presentation is basically directed at people who are running microbiome testing companies or a medical professional who wants to make use of microbiome test results. And my attempt is to encapsulate the key aspect of my current understanding of the clinical use of the microbiome. First thing, I'm not a medical professional. I am a statistician. I work professionally doing AI programming. I've taught AI, artificial intelligence, university. Um, I have a reasonably solid science background, including teaching at college level sciences. So I'm not a professional, but I do understand the issues and I can read medical studies. In fact, been reading medical studies since I was 15. So I understand the issues reasonably well. So this is my quote, non-professional in terms of medical, very professional in terms of artificial intelligence and data forecasting methodologies. So, overview, I'm going to look at the following aspect. We're going to look at the aspect of selecting what lab services to use and the processing pipelines involved. Then, once you get the lab results, then you have to figure out which bacteria to focus on. Why? Because some lab results could have 6,000 bacteria there. Which bacteria are the ones of concern? Well, a few of them, like C. difficile, is real easy to know what to do. Or if a person has cholera, you know which one to do, typhus, etc. But if it's dysbiosis, a shift of multiple bacteria in the wrong directions, then it is not so easy. So the question is, which one of these 6,000, these 8,000 different bacteria should you focus on? Which ones are the ones you want to spend your time on? You could try doing all in magical solution, but I think you could have problems. Once you know which bacteria you want to focus on, then you want to know how to shift the bacteria, how to increase those which you're deemed too low, or decrease those which are too high. And since we're not talking about one bacteria, but 10 bacteria or even 100 different bacteria to shift different ways, we find that when we go to the literature, we find, oh, this substance shifts these downwards, good. Oh, but they also shift these upwards. Oh, which means you end up with a dilemma as to what to actually make use of to address the bacteria which are in your focus. The last thing is looking at hand-holding and follow-up testing. So you got your test results, you have figured out everything magically, you have created a plan to help your patient improve the microbiome, decrease the dysbiosis, or in some cases decrease the dysbiosis because the consequence is their diabetes becomes less severe or their prognosis for cancer actually becomes better because of altering microbiome shift, which are associated with increased risk of diabetes or increased risk of cancer. So we end up with a hand-holding a follow-up. But this is, okay, so what do you do? This is not just a one-time test, we are done. We are trying to alter, in one sense, a population, like a human population, like a country's population, trying to alter them. And we may come in and do a whole bunch of things, and we'll call the population to shift. But first of all, will the shift stay, or will it shift back to the old things? Or will it go to the opposite extreme? In other words, yes, you have, for example, right now in terms of politics, you have so-called too liberal, and you have, the result is you have a hardcore, almost extremist reaction to it in the general population of a certain unnamed country. So, handholding and follow-up, microbiome should be viewed not as a easy single factor. It is a population which is going to shift one way or the other, and you have to monitor the shift to keep a healthy population. Okay, let's start with it. Let's start with understanding lab testing. First of all, is clinical lab testing is vital for acceptability for you as a medical professional, and it's actually the easy part. You basically ask the question, what standards are they conforming to? What accreditations do they have? Ideally, you want somebody who is conform to all the standards and have all the accreditation. That's the ideal thing. If not, then you have to figure out what you're willing to compromise on. Or in some cases, the one with all the certification costs more because it costs money to get those certifications. So they have to recover the costs. Other ones say, there's no profitability in getting the certification done because we don't have enough demand of people asking for the certification, so it doesn't pay for itself. So that's the first question. One lab may be certified, one lab may not be certified, and they may produce identical results. But for acceptance in journals, in perhaps even in medical, even reimbursement from insurance companies or health institutes, you probably will need to have good, solid certifications and accreditations and standards. So that's actually the easy part because the labs will tell you right away. And then we go on to the more challenging parts. Which one of the many different ways of getting a microbiome report done. 16S is probably the most popular for direct to retail sample. It's also because of the cheapest, often the one that is used in something like 80 or 90% of published studies uses it because it is cheap. Shotgun metagenomics is a new one. It looks at a lot more. There it is high resolution. It gives a lot of information, but that also means you have a lot of information to process, which is the flip side. More information means more work for you, or however you're going to do the processing and evaluation. You have more information. Now, one solution is simply to randomly go through, nitpick a couple of items that you understand and ignore the rest. Not the idea. You want ideally to do a holistic evaluation. 16S, because of less information, is somewhat easier to handle. As you go to shotgun, more expensive, more effort on you, more data. You have qPCR, keyword, that is for a specific DNA target. That works well if you know exactly what you're looking for. Absolutely know what you're looking for. If it's general dysbiosis, that doesn't help because chances are you're not going to be targeting what the cause is. The cause may be some oddball thing or some combination of shifts. qPCR is well defined for looking for a specific bacteria that is the cause, or pretty much a single bacteria. A couple cases may be multiple. Culture-based is very much old school, and it is restricted to one which are culturable, which often generally means ones which are hostile towards oxygen. Oxygen will kill them. So it gives you a very slighted, very biased thing, almost like going in and going to a high-class shopping mall and doing a survey as to is the price of groceries going up or down. The answer you get from that mall is going to be very different if you go into an area of the city where there's a food desert. You're going to get very different answers, and the culture base has the same type of risk. And then we have additional ones there, and I won't deal with those particularly. The ones I have personally dealt with mainly are 16S and shotgun. I have looked at qPCR, and I have a qPCR report on my site. I even have a culture based, but as I said, the first two are the ones which gives you a practical amount of information to address with something which doesn't fit nicely into a well-defined, well-documented, well-known box, which you can apply a cookbook formula to. Okay, so once you look at the two, let's say 6 shotgun or 16S, you hit a next horrible dilemma. The lack of standardization is a critical issue. Okay, I became aware of that because I was using Microbiome many, and I would say almost decades ago. When they went out of business, I got the FASTQ file from there, and there were 4 firms who offered processing a FASTQ file for free. So I went and uploaded them. And to my horror and to my shock, I had practically zero agreement between them. I said, some said I had high amount of certain bacteria, others said have none of this bacteria. Another one says for a particular bacteria, iron was very high, another one was very low. In other words, it was absolute, excuse me, what is going on here? Why? Just the same digital file, the same raw data, not a physical sample, but the digital sample, digital result of reading the sample through the same machine. So I then did a bit of digging around and found this lovely study and a quote from this, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which I've been to. I had done conferences there, and the basic bottom line is that this is from, I think, 2019, and it's worse now. 97 different ways to take the same raw data file, and you will get 97 different answers. Okay, so what is the definitive answer? There is none. There is no definitive answer. Doesn't mean it's not workable. What it means is you have to look deeper into the issues and understand the issues better in order to be able to work with the data. So basically, you picked your lab, you got all the certification, and now you get your report, and you get one report, and your patient or yourself, you went to say, okay, let's just upload it someplace else and get it and see what they report, and you get a totally different answer. And you do a third page, so totally different answer. In which case you probably throw up your hand and say, okay, this is too complicated, this is too immature, forget about it. No, it's not that bad. It's actually just requires some discipline. So, the first question is you get the result and now you want to take a look at it. Before going down that pipeline, every time we look at the published clinical study, you have to take a look at the fact that if they describe, not everyone will, if they describe the process in detail, are you doing the identical same processing? And then you have to look at the next factor. Are the age and mixture of the population the same as what you're using? Is the diet of the people the same as what you're using? Are these healthy individuals, or are these individuals with IBS or with Crohn's or with diabetes? Each one of those criteria potentially threatens that clinical study is technically not applicable to use. In fact, if you keep this up and are absolutely rigorous, you'll find a horrible, horrible reality. There's not a single published clinical study that are usable in an absolute strict sense. You could say, okay, I think this is reasonably good, I think it's applied, and you basically fly by the seat of your pants on a wing and a prayer, which is reasonable, it's acceptable, but you need to be conscious of the fact that you are dealing with fuzzy data. And that is a word I use a lot. I use the word fuzzy data. And you're also dealing with sparse data. You don't have that much information to work from most of the time. Because most of the time, the studies, because of the testing methodology they're using, the sample size, only reports on a few items. And often is a problem. Where I found great success, and this is something which you have to do over time, using the same microbiome testing one, doing lots of good capturing of metadata. Then you can do a, quote, in-house analysis. You can use your collection of samples, which are all done precisely the same way, and the larger collection, the more accurate results. For microbiome prescription, for one particular lab, I had something like 4,200 different samples with a wide variety of symptoms and conditions, and I got a wonderful result in terms of being able to do predictive algorithms for what somebody has. In other words, I can have 90% accuracy, so that new sample comes in and I go and run through my algorithm and I say, okay, do you have any of these symptoms? In real good cases, I have had 8 out of the 10 of highest predicted symptoms being the person coming back and saying, I'm shocked, you got my 8 worst symptoms at the top of your list. How in the world do you do that? Okay, now here we need to be aware. You can't just go and hand this data to a statistician. The statistician has to actually know a lot of the microbiome. And I have a real simple challenge, which is generally the first thing you want to go and ask them to do. And if they can't do it, they haven't learned enough of a microbiome, so you just ask them, okay, keep digging more, keep digging more, do more exploration. I asked them to do a coefficient determination between two bacteria, and in my particular case, I use an Akkermansia municipa and Blottia. Okay, when sorry, the numbers are covered. When I did a naive one, just taking the linear value of them from 1,000 samples, I got the R-square being 0.00, I think it was 0.004. I wonder if I can move my head a little bit. Yes, 0.43. And when I went and did more advanced techniques, and I have a master's in operations research, which is a very specialized branch of statistics, I managed to get a 0.23 from an R-square. So understanding what's going on with the microbiome causes a much higher R-square. A naive standard statistics 101 approach, you get 0.0023, practically no relationship at all. And that is where you really need to make sure you get a good statistician who can think outside the box, literally outside the box, who is diligent, who is persistent, and you're willing to invest the time and money in them going through the learning curve to get them to understand the data of the microbiome. It is not a normal distribution. You cannot use mean and standard deviation. That is absolutely, can be proven by hypothesis testing to be absolutely false. It fails the hypothesis test for every single bacteria. Oh, what is hypothesis test? Okay, hypothesis test is whether or not the measure using like mean and standard deviation applies. You test whether or not the data is what's called a Gaussian distribution or a normal curve or a bell curve. And if it doesn't, statistically not a bell curve, you can't use mean and standard deviation. Simple as that. Statistics 101 people don't know the difference. Often you won't get somebody knowing the difference until they have at least a master's in statistics. So once you get a good statistician or data scientist or AI person, you want to go and get good forecasting of the symptoms required. You have your big data set, you have your symptoms, and now you tell the person to go and feed it into your random forest, in your tons of different AI techniques, and produce a good predictive model. Ideally, you want a model which is running 90% accurate. 80% is okay. 70% is so-so, and unfortunately I've seen studies where the predictability of the algorithm is just 60 percentile, and the author seems to be rejoicing, saying, look at a wonderful result, 60% accurate. I'm, to be frank and honest, I'm not impressed. I'm able to get 80 or 90% often being the case. One on my cross-reference I had 92% accuracy, and that was using PubMed study and my algorithms based on my understanding of microbiome. You need to get a high percent of cross-validation, and that is again something which takes time. It means hiring good people and telling them go to it, and it means sometimes you have to find a creative person, the person who thinks outside the box, because this isn't, how to say, a simple mechanical process. This is dealing with a population of bacteria that grossly interacts with each other back and forth. And you need that to be understood, or at least understood enough that the appropriate models are used for it. Okay, so let's assume you have done the job right and you have some good predictive models. Well, the bacteria users on the models are the ones you want to focus on. The rest of the bacteria, no matter how severely high or how severely low they are, you don't want to make use of. You want to use only the bacteria in the model. And the bacteria in the model from your population which this person has. So those are the ones you want to predict on. You want to, I hate to say it, ignore the rest of it. Because it just, you are going to be overfitting your solution. And that's probably the best expression, overfitting. By tossing in everything, you're going to overfit, and you're going to put a bias in your intervention, which could go in the wrong direction. So you want to choose a bacteria which are the best for classing for cross-validation results. You want to ignore statistical significance of individual bacteria. You have to think about the whole thing. Bacteria, again, have complex interaction. One bacteria produces a metabolite which feeds another bacteria, which now cascades, and you want to find out which one of this cascade is the one which are actually the most significant for the condition, and you want to focus on that one. You don't want to focus on each one of them. So you have 6 bacteria, all which are effective in the same pipeline, and you have a bias being inserted into your model which is inappropriate. Now, many people I see, and many sites see, oh, your bacteria is out of range. Well, generally the range is done by using mean and standard deviation, which, before you say anything, is invalid. It's wrong. Also, this is what I would call pre-computer and definitely pre-artificial intelligence thinking, or pre-data science thinking. It is so old school, excuse expression, last millennium. It's laughable, but the catch is, the people who are doing that, A, generally don't know better. B, if they know better, they can't afford the cost of doing it right. So they're just doing what seems to be sufficient. It was everybody else is doing, so I'll just follow the crowd because it won't affect my financial bottom line by following it. Now, if you invest the time and money in doing it right, it goes to impact your financial bottom line. You need to have, ideally, something like the Gates Foundation funding you so you can do it properly. But that's it. That's the reality out there. A lot of people will simply say out of range because they know no better or can't afford to do it properly. Again, keeping to the best performing forecast models, you could actually do 2 or 3 models which may pick different bacteria, but you want to, if you're doing, for example, I often use a Monte Carlo method. I do things 3 or 4 different ways and get consensus. So if you have 3 models that all produce reasonably well, you apply each one, get your intervention plan, take the next one, get your intervention plan, get the third one, take your intervention plan. So you end up with 3 intervention plans, and then you see where all of them agree or disagree. And where they all agree is your preferred intervention plan. So you don't want to go in and just take, oh, Model 1 has this bacteria, Model 2 has this bacteria, Model 3 has this bacteria. So I'm going to use these 3 for different models. No, you want to keep consistent to the forecasting model and work from there for your intervention plan. Okay, let's get on to talking about intervention plan, shifting microbiome balances. Basically, we have a variety of ways at a high level. We have probiotic ones, which introduce beneficial bacteria into the microbiome, which may promote a healthy balance. In some cases, it won't. For example, you go and pick a probiotic which happens to produce a fair amount of D-lactic acid, and if the person is suffering from brain fog, probably caused by D-lactic acidosis, it's going to make things worse. So often you need to have a little bit more intelligence about probiotics are not a magic cure-all, magic bullet that solves everybody's problem. It can make some conditions worse, it can make some conditions better. For example, Parkinson's has, I believe, high Akkermansia and high bifidobacterium. Taking bifidobacterium or Akkermansia probiotics is likely to make the symptoms worse. So probiotic introduction is good, but there. Prebiotics suffer the same thing. Prebiotics encourage certain bacteria to grow. By simply providing the metabolites there, sometimes that is good. The right prebiotics to supply the right chemicals to produce a metabolite is sweet, but you have to make sure you have the right one. Again, no cure all. Herbal microbiome businesses are another one like probiotic. They're good and they're bad. Some herbs are actually have been reported to be better than some antibiotics for certain bacteria. And some will encourage, some will discourage. For example, every day I had a question, people ask about garlic. It inhibits a whole bunch of bad bacteria. It also inhibits bifidobacterium, which is a good bacteria. So there is lots of complexity there. Antibiotics, again, is sometimes beneficial. Often antibiotics affect certain bacteria only. Other cases, it is firing a shotgun. You, instead of being a sniper rifle picking up the specific bacteria you're doing, you are firing a shotgun into a crowd and you're getting lots of casualties, which you, because you're so focused on taking out this one bad guy, was, well, friendly fire, and you now have to deal with picking up the wounded afterwards. So those are the typical ways of doing a microbiome shift. Each one of them has gotchas to them. Then we go on into the fact that the substances, all these substances have uncertainty on how they change the microbiome. Uncertainty. Wait a minute. Fuzziness. We have a problem there. Every probably suffer from, often suffer from non-repeatability. Often you find studies saying something changes something, and there's a single study, and that's all you can find anywhere. Study has never been replicated. Of course, a good scientist knows a non-replicated study should be taken with a grain of salt, or in some cases a tablespoon of salt, or perhaps a little bit of pepper, depending on what it is. Some cases, like for example, inulin increased bifidobacterium is reported in at least 55 studies that I'm aware of. So you should be pretty confident that inulin will increase bifidobacterium. Nice, easy one. If bifidobacterium is low and that's the issue, okay, good. If bifidobacterium is high, you may want to be hesitant about using inulin, because although it may increase the bacteria you're looking at, it may have adverse effect on bifidobacterium. Other ones like proton pump inhibitors have been well reported in literature to have different responses from different people. Oh, ooh, so does it increase or does it decrease? There's nothing absolute with modifiers. You have things which have a high probability of going one way, but you have other things which go either way. Key point of frustration. The key factor is often the existing microbiome is a significant factor for the direction of the shift in some cases. If the study was done on somebody with diabetes or with Alzheimer's, you will get the shift going in one direction, but somebody with autism, it will go in a different direction. So the existing microbiome is a significant factor. The problem is compounded because the studies are all done on populations and you don't have individual results, which means you have more uncertainty, more unfuzziness in the response. Often you will find many ones like for VSL number 3, probiotics are mixtures. In the case VSL3 recently came a study where many probiotics will result in weight loss. Nice clinical study found that VSL3 actually resulted in weight gain. Now, some of the bacteria species listed in the VSL3 are in separate studies found to decrease weight. But when they're in this combination, they increase weight. How, we don't know. And that's why I tend to be very much favoring single strain probiotics for intervention. No mixtures at all. And generally very fresh probiotics I get direct from the factory, and there are some factories that will ship direct to you. And do it in suitable quantities, which for probiotics, I generally go with the rule of thumb of 50 billion CFUs per day as a reasonable amount. Studies of other problems, such as lack of standardization of evaluation protocol. Often they report assuming a normal distribution and then use significance of mean, which is very questionable because we're not dealing with a normal distribution. We are dealing with a host of different, and if you check out my site microbiome prescription, you see all sorts of different shapes for microbiome distribution. It's just sort of, it is not for the faint of statistics. The last factor involved is that, as cited above for inulin, often many sites are seeing ignores undesirable impact on other bacteria. They will focus only on one bacteria and say, oh, you don't have the bacteria and therefore you should take inulin. Nice, simple, slam dunk. They ignore the fact that 4 other bacteria which are too high in will instead of going down, will actually go up, and you're making the patient worse. So you need to be able to factor in everything into there. My own solution was literally writing an artificial intelligence system that takes in there. Actually, the specific type of system is a fuzzy logic expert system working out facts, about 2.5 million facts at the moment, and growing every week because every week more data gets added from new PubMed studies. So this is the type of factor you have to figure in. It has gone beyond the ability of any single human to keep everything in their noodle, which means if you're talking to somebody who claims to know it in their brain what to do, well, they belong in the previous millennium when that was the reality. In the current millennium, with cheapness of computing power, with a variety of very good artificial intelligence systems there, you can do better. And somebody has to be able to build a artificial intelligence system that they trust and which they have validated to be correct. Just don't go with ChatGPT, because we know it is full of hallucinations, false information. It's been nailed time and again. Legal filing judges have really done nasty jobs. If you prescribe medical advice to a patient based on that and it turns out to be hallucination, you are de facto guilty of malpractice. Simple as that. So my solution is using an expert system where every bit of information is tracked back to the study so that there is basically no risk of malpractice because everything is reasonable based on actual clinical study that exists. No hallucinations allowed. Okay, now you have your magical intervention plan, the treatment, the person is doing it. Now the person comes back after X months on it, and you do another microbiome test to see how the person is doing it. Now you end up having an evaluation dilemma. You could go with a subjective evaluation, but you'll find some patient that's clean cut, absolutely straightforward, no problems, just there, everything is better. But other patients you find, they feel better or they're worse. They could feel worse because they are suffering from die-off from some of the change you do. It's causing some bacteria to die and dump the toxins into the body, which is causing the worst symptoms. Symptoms are known to wane or wax both ways, and new symptoms may appear, which means that subjective evaluation is at best questionable unless you get lucky, in which case you are happy and the patient is happy. Go out and have a suitable drink for this person's microbiome with him in celebration. My preference is trying to do objective evaluation of the goal. Here is where I get sort of sneaky. I use my forecasting model to as the best approach. It provides diagnosis by diagnosis of the impact of the intervention. For example, on the left is somebody which I just recently had a podcast with, and you can see the old sample, which was only 8 weeks. After 8 weeks intervention, and you can go down and you see for every symptom he has, the model evaluate a percentile ranking in the model, and you can see that every single one went down. Not cured, just became better, every single one, which meant he had some objective data on him. And if one of them goes up, then I know where I probably need to focus a little bit more emphasis for the next intervention, because each one of these models is actually a different forecasting model being used, and each forecasting model results in a different intervention proposal, which again I use Monte Carlo model and consolidate all of them. So in this case, I think we have 16 models effectively being created, applied, suggestions from them, and then combine the 16 there with the emphasis on whatever everybody agrees on. If something goes in the wrong direction, the suggestions from that model should be a higher priority. You should need to give it a greater rate in a Monte Carlo model. One thing I want to warn about, because I see it done too often and I shake my head saying, excuse me, you are just trying to find answers to give people because they expect answers, not because you actually want to do the best answer. And these are speculative or hypotheses which have been proposed in the literature, and because they're proposed in the literature, you're going to use them, and because they improved, you're going to tell the patient they have improved. The child 1, H index, Shannon index, Simpson index, etc. Folks, stop. They have not, none of them have been validated for the general population as a health indicator. And in general, they are often disputed in the literature for different conditions. There are other ones which have shown up in one case, for example, longevity. This particular profile is a good predictor of longevity, but those studies have never been validated by a second or third study, which means they are speculative. They are hypotheses. They have not been validated. You need repeated validation from different studies done independently, ideally with different microbiome processing steps, before you can have any reliance on them or dare tell them to the patient as being definitive. The objective evaluation of the model is not validated per se. It is validated in terms of how the model was developed because it has cross validation. And so it has validation, but it's not the type of validation which is likely to be published. It is something which is convincible to a data scientist or artificial intelligence expert. Again, it depends on your source of truth or objectivity. Not exactly the ideal situation, especially if you are well indoctrinated to trust PubMed. Okay, now we'll go on to the last part, the clinical patient supports. After creating your individual treatment plan, tailored to specific needs and conditions, again, I personally always use a Monte Carlo model to get the best suggestions coming out. I don't do it actually as rigorous as I should, mainly because I offer a free service, no cost to anybody, and the deeper I go, the longer the processing takes, and the bigger my CPU processing bill becomes. And those bills are covered by donations, so I sell nothing. I offer no services, so donations so far are sufficient to cover the cost, and because they just cover the cost, I do what is sufficient. And the more detailed models are there, and when I tried them, I have not gotten a sufficient improvement to warrant the extra cost. You want to have access to medical professionals. These are people who are not just hired hands which are using call center people. You want somebody who actually knows enough and have well-prepared scripts, ideally expert systems for them to deal with customer things. And basically, You want these people to have timely consultation. You can use expert system if they are well designed and built and tested to expedite the simple cases. But basically, the essentials are if things like die-off or Herxheimer reaction like occurs, which will occur with some people with some conditions, or if other there may be other things that you'll be phoned up about and you have to know how to deal with. For example, you do a probiotic like Bacillus subtilis, and that's suddenly causes constipation, or you do another one and it causes massive diarrhea or rashes or itches or some other change of symptoms, and the person has or the person needs to know look at the treatment plan and see if they can identify which part of the treatment plan is causing it and ask them to stop that, or B, know how to treat with a symptom. You need to be able to have these people knowledgeable enough to be able to evaluate what could be causing that in the intervention plan, and B, how the patient can address it. It's not B, stop everything. You want them to be able to reduce the items that are the probable causes. So that means you may end up having to invest in getting a reasonably good expert system built to handle these calls. Then you got the question of repeating testing interval, and that should always be in the patient's best interest, not the testing company financial interest or your insurance company's willingness to pay in best interest. What I generally suggested from my experience is 6 to 12 weeks after applying has been started, and generally what happens is that's 12 weeks. The person has to get the sample, does it, goes in for processing, the result comes back, which is another 4 weeks. So the person stays on the old program plan for 16 weeks. Data comes in, we do a fast evaluation, and they go on to a new plan. Now here we have something to be understood. The person's microbiome is here, and the plan shifted. And the catch is that the plan shifted part way here and not back to where you want to be, right here in the middle. Other cases, the plan starts here and takes us way over here, and now you have the next plan telling them to do the opposite of what the first plan does, and you end up going oscillating back and forth until eventually hopefully the person will stabilize there. And that is what particularly happened with me with my last major chronic fatigue syndrome relapse. I was testing, basically testing the 4 weeks intervention retest, and I found I was going back and forth, but eventually labeled down and stabilized, and I have since stabilized, and I do periodic testing just to catch things before they become thing, and also tend to keep a maintenance plan. I know where my particular weaknesses are, so I keep to it. And one weakness for me was simple: stress. So I basically keep my life choices, employment, and everything else to be low stress, which means sometimes I turn off the news for weeks at a time because I don't want to know what's happening. Okay, so that is basically it. This is my take on what a microbiome testing company that provides full end-to-end clinical support should be doing, and information about how each aspect should be doing it. It is challenging, it's expensive. One of the things I see often is testing companies run out of money before they get to the whole thing. Microbiome was a lovely case of bankruptcy. They went too far too fast, and they didn't have the right depth of pocketbook, so they ran out. More commonly, microbiome company will go out there, and what their main concern is selling product and making money from that. And what they do is they do lip service on their advice and everything else to keep the customer happy, or to placate the customer. Keyword: placate the customer. Not necessarily give them solid good advice, but give them something that they reasonably happy with, and come back for more there. So that is the unfortunate reality. Me, I'm off in my own little corner, which is because of personal issues, of family issues. I want to do it right. I recognize from reading the literature, from seeing the data problem, that okay, there are problems here. There are nasty problems. Fortunately, my academic and 50 years of experience teaching AI, working for Microsoft, working for Amazon, working for Starbucks, working for other companies. I have a wide range of skill sets, including being able to handle data. I have a good science background, and I have a very solid statistics background. And so I suddenly looked and said, wait a minute, this problem is solvable. Does require thinking outside the box, but it can be done with a high degree of rigorousness in terms of mathematics and data science, which means it is a solvable problem. It is just not the typical type of solution which a medical practitioner has. And to cite many profs who told me not to go into two careers, don't go into law, and don't go into medicine. I don't go, sorry, first, don't become an engineer. Why? Very simple reason. I'm a creative thinker, which means I will break with standards, conformity, and the cookbooks, which means that my career in any one of those three things will be very, very short-lived, because creativity and not following the cookbook is a sure way to get fired or to get sued. I ended up in computer science, where nonconformity and breaking the rules is well rewarded, as you know from my days at Microsoft, and even having supper over at Bill Gates' place. So that's how I got to where I am, and I'm sharing my experience. I'd rather have competition for my site out there with people providing end-to-end services and doing it in a public open method. And so that's basically it. I think I'll shut up now because I've talked on enough. So bye. My name is Ken Lasseson. I have a Master of Science, or accepted for a PhD program. I have 50 years in the business, and I'm just enjoying myself, wanting to help people and to do things right.